My name is Sergeant James P. McMichael. I'm with the Arlington County Sheriff's Office in Arlington, Virginia. I'm going to tell you about the events of the day of 9/11/2001. My day started off basically as it always had been for the past year. I was assigned at that point to the court security section of the Sheriff's Office and had gone in, searched our courtroom. We were in the midst of a jury trial, and the jury was in the back for deliberations. I think they got in at about 9 o'clock, and they were in the back. The judge was upstairs, just myself and my partner were in the courtroom. We had an individual came into the courtroom, and I don't remember the exact time, and advised us that a plane had flown into one of the towers in New York. And everybody just kind of thought it was an accident. It might have been a small plane or something. Somebody just wasn't paying attention. Nobody at that point thought that there was a terrorist attack going on. And then shortly thereafter, and again I don't remember the exact time, someone else came in and told us that a plane had hit the second tower. And at that point, that's when everybody started getting kind of panicky, and at that point we kind of knew something was going on that shouldn't have been going on. And I turned to my partner and I said, I got a feeling something's going to happen here, thinking we were the next logical target. And it wasn't long after that we got audible tone over the radio, which is what we get that when there's an emergency situation or there's an all call that has to go out between the agencies. And one of our deputies was out on the road with a work crew and came across the radio saying that the Pentagon was on fire. And a minute later, the audible tone came up again. Another of the deputies said the Pentagon's not on fire, that a plane just flew over his head. I think he was on 110 in the van, and the plane flew directly over top of them and into the side of the Pentagon. And at that point, we went up, and the judge had come down after we had heard about the second plane. I advised her at that time that we were going to be clearing the courthouse, and we got everybody out of the courtroom and cleared the courthouse out. As I was going downstairs, which was probably been about 10 minutes after the plane hit, one of our sergeants threw a set of cruiser keys to me and said, get out there and do what you got to do. So I went downstairs, got in the car, lit the lights up, turned the sirens on, started out of parking garage, turned the corner and went down to Route 50, and realized that at that point I didn't remember how to get to the Pentagon. And I drive by the Pentagon every day, but at that point everything was going at 100 miles an hour, and pulled on to 50. There was traffic was completely backed up, and it felt like it was taking forever, but it was probably a matter of seconds. I was trying to remember, how do I get there, and then I noticed a bunch of people started getting out of their cars, yelling at the other cars to move out of the way, and they got them to clear out of the way so that I could get through. And at that point I snapped out of my little phase that I was going through there and got onto Washington Boulevard and went around to the Pentagon. One of the things we had, one of our deputies, or two of our deputies, were sitting at the Washington Boulevard exit from 50, and I asked them where we needed to go, where were they directing people, and they didn't know. And that was the same response that everybody had. Nobody knew where we were supposed to be going, where we needed help, what was going on, and you couldn't get on the radio because everybody was on the radio asking where to go, what needed to be done, what was going on at the Pentagon. And I remember coming around the corner, because when you go down Washington Boulevard and you take the exit to go to the Pentagon, I just remember coming around the corner and seeing the building, and it was just chaos. I mean, there was fire shooting up, there was smoke everywhere, and I pulled the cruiser down and got out of the car, started running towards the building, and then we had another audible tone saying that, actually I think that was after the fact, when I started towards the building, they came across the loudspeakers telling us to get away from the building, to move back 500 feet from the building, I think it was. So everybody's running up there, and we had to turn around and run back because they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know if the structure was going to collapse. And then the audible tone kicked up saying there was another plane coming up the Potomac. And they started, it was almost a countdown. They would do an audible tone and it was 5 minutes out. And then the audible tone would click and they'd say 4 minutes out. And at this point, we're up there. I was with another officer from the police department, and I turned to him and said, we really picked the wrong place to be right now, because this plane's come up here, we're going to get hit. And I thought for sure, and I think he thought the same thing, we were going to die at that location. And I think it got to 1 minute out, and then they realized, whoever was making the call about it, that those were the jets that they were scrambling for the remaining plane that was over Shanksville. And so at that point, once they finally did that, that took a little bit of stress away. But then we went back over to the Pentagon, and we're trying to deal with that. There was helicopters landing to medevac people out. There was ambulances everywhere, and people were running from the Pentagon up the hills onto the highway and over into the mall area. And I just remember, as we're running towards the building, everybody's running away from the building, and just the looks on people's faces of just terror and confusion and not knowing what was going on was very disturbing. Because usually you don't, this is the first time we've ever dealt with anything like this, and I've seen people's faces like that, but not in the masses of people that we had coming at us. The just the sounds, the smells, everything that just stuck with you. The jet fuel burning was horrible, and seeing the people being pulled from the building, and just nobody knew, it was complete chaos there. And that went on for, it was hours that they were trying to pull people out and get that whole area situated. And we went and we were setting up the crime scene around the Pentagon, which was a little later in the day. And I remember there was one young lady that worked there. We had set the crime scene up, and she took off under the crime scene tape, and I had to chase her across the parking lot to get a hold of her. And when I did, I asked her, I was like, ma'am, where are you going? And she just looked at me with the same, she had a 1,000-yard stare in her eyes. I mean, she was not looking at me at all. And she just kept saying, I left something on my desk, I left something on my desk. And I turned her around and pointed at the building and went, ma'am, you cannot go into the building. And I guess she finally, when she looked at the big hole in the building, it kind of snapped her out of the daze she was in. And then she just started crying. I led her back to the area where we were at with the reporters, and after that, then I don't know what rank the guy was, a higher rank military official. Same thing, except he was worried about getting his car and didn't understand why we couldn't let him in to get his car, and was very irate about that. So you got kind of all spectrums of people that day, but the majority of them were just confused, and you couldn't use your cell phones. I mean, nobody could get a hold of family members, and it was just mass confusion there. That day was very long. I don't think I got relieved from that post until 2:30 in the morning. And the one thing that really stuck with me about that day was probably about halfway through the day, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock-ish, we started seeing volunteers show up. And I turned around at one point, and two of our judges from the circuit court were sleeves rolled up, carrying water bottles to the responders. And we had people showing up bringing us food because we didn't have any food out there at the time. People were bringing us food. People were just coming up asking how we were doing. We ended up having, I think it was like McDonald's and Outback, a bunch of companies brought in trucks and just started setting up. It was almost like a tent city in the parking lot there, and everybody came together. We had people, by the end of the night, somehow word had got out that they were bringing in search and rescue dogs, and people started bringing in like little socks and booty things for the dogs. I mean, it was amazing to me that how everybody had come together that day after what had happened that morning. And I remember too, while we were up later on when I was stationed with the media, there was somebody came across from the FBI saying that there was a bomb threat by the gas station that we had the media set up at. So we were running around trying to find that, and that turned out to be a hoax, just like all the bomb threats that they had claimed were going on in D.C. But I just remember that there was so much confusion that day, but everybody, from the responder aspect of it, we just got in there and we did our job. And I know I didn't really think about much of anything that day except doing my job. I didn't make an attempt to call my family, and that didn't even cross my mind until that night when I got home. I think, or actually it was earlier than that. I got probably about 8 or 9 o'clock. I could finally use my cell phone and called to let everybody know that I was okay. But the whole day nobody knew, and that was one of the big stressors for my family. They all knew that I was in the area, was going to respond to that, but they didn't know how I was doing and had no way of getting in touch with me. And like I said, I think the most surprising part of the day was, on the good side, was all the people coming together, helping us out and bringing us food and bringing the supplies in that were needed. The most shocking part was probably coming around that corner for the first time, because you don't know, you know a plane hit the building, but you weren't knowing what to expect and on what level. And just seeing it that first time was just, you stop. I think I literally stopped my car in the middle of the highway and sat there for a second looking at it. And then when the floors collapsed, that was another thing, because you're back at a distance and everything's coming down, and you're hoping that nobody is in there, because I know we had a couple of our guys that I know personally were in there pulling people out, and that's one of the things that crossed my mind when all that was going on, are our guys in there, because we literally didn't know where anybody was. We didn't know who was down there. And the only reason I know that they were there is because I saw them before they ran off to start doing their stuff. I think I didn't really understand how lasting the effects of the day were going to be on me. I knew that it was a bad day, it was the worst day I've ever had, and will probably be the worst day I ever have in my career. But it wasn't until probably about a year later where the effects had started showing up to me. I'm sure they had been going on before that. I wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating. I was having flashbacks of the event. Anytime our radio, anytime our, like I said earlier, anytime that we have an emergency that goes across the county, we have a loud audible tone that goes off, and anytime that audible tone would go off after that, it didn't matter where I was standing, I was back at the Pentagon, hearing everything, seeing everything, smelling everything. I was there. And that started off progressively and just got really, really bad, to the point where it was, happening more often than just from the audible tones. if a plane flew over too low, which happens a lot where we're at because we're right next to the National Airport. If a plane flew over too low, same thing. And I kept telling myself, "Oh, I'll get through this." At that point, I had been a member of our peer support or critical incident stress management team, and we work with first responders following critical incidents like that, police shootings. So I had been trained in how to work with other people that were going through this type of stuff and how to handle the situations and the responses to it. I knew what I should be doing, but I kept telling myself, I know how to do this, I can handle this, I don't need to seek help. And it's probably about a year later after the incident that I started withdrawing from my family, my friends. I was going to work, going through the motions of the job, but I was not there. I would work all day, I would go home at night, I would sit in a dark room. I didn't want anything to do with anybody, I didn't want to talk about anything, because every time I did, I kept remembering that day. And that went on for about another year after that, and at that point, my wife at the time just said she had enough, and she started going out and doing her own thing. And when I finally realized that she was getting ready to leave, at that point, I ended up going in and speaking to our EAP, which is like our psychological help services for the county, and they did a battery test on me and diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder, and that was 2 years after I think it was about a year and a half, 2 years after the incident. But again, I kept saying,